say vote yes on it. If you hate Lyft so much and you're so mad about Prop 22, which I also am, that you can't possibly vote yes on it, sure, vote no. It's kind of like, honestly, this one's splitting progressives because of this. And for some reason, Gavin Newsom is fucking making ads with his face in them about how he thinks you should vote no. So
this is not a good look.
It's totally scrambled. Like this is the problem with the proposition system is it's gotten like this proposition, the discourse about it has gotten totally toxic and weird and confusing.
Measure 31.
It bans flavored vape tobacco. I mean, I think yes.
Unacceptable.
Okay, well then no.
Don't be a pussy.
If you like to vape,
to
vape, vote no.
Boys, if you're fucking hitting, okay? If you're hitting Blinkertons off the Benjamin on the regular, think about what Fulcrum Gang would say. Think about what Yoda Gang would say, okay? I am smackington the Benjamin on a daily. No, I'm kidding. I don't fucking smoke vapes, and
okay.
I think it's bad. It's
okay.
Whatever. Who gives a shit?
I want to shout out Chris here real quick because these California Supreme Court seats. So this is just like you vote whether the person should stay in the seat or not. No one has lost any of these since 1986. Almost everybody said just vote yes for everybody. Who gives a shit? Chris is the only person I've seen who did the heroic work of going through each of these judges and figuring out which one is good and bad. Even on my Instagram guide, I said just vote for yes all of them. Don't worry about it because like no one ever loses these. But Chris actually broke it down. If you really are a fucking election nerd and you want to make sure you don't vote for anybody bad, go read Chris's guide and get into it. And like big ups to Chris for putting it together.
Okay. On that note, we're gonna move on to national politics. Yeah. Okay, not just California. And I'm bringing in roaming correspondent Dave Weigel, if he's still here, because we are 40 minutes late to having him on.
Sorry, Dave. Man, that's a nice click on your keyboard. You got a good click.
Yeah, it's oh yeah, he is here. Okay, let's do it.
Great.
I am going to first turn off my camera here and then reactivate it here.
I'm gonna split probably about half an hour, 40 minutes, but
okay, all right,
if you don't mind.
Okay, let's see. Oh, boom, there it is.
Yo.
Oh, wait, hold on. If you're talking, Dave, I can't hear you yet. I'm going to fix that in one moment. It's because my audio setups are weird on Discord.
Fucking Discord changes the audio setup constantly.
But you can hear me, right? If you can hear me, please give me a thumbs up.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, I can hear you now. It's perfect. We're here. We're live. You know Adam, right? Adam, Dave.
What's up, Dave?
Adam Conover from...
Adam.
Good to see you, man.
Good to see you.
He says he's a big fan of you.
Yeah.
How's Ugo looking? You probably discussed it before I jumped on, but how's that race going?
Ugo's looking pretty. Yeah, we last talked at Ugo's at the big fundraiser gala thing, right?
Yeah.
Comedy show. Yeah, I think he's looking pretty good. I mean, he's running so hard. Like he's got people knocking doors every day. Nobody gives a shit about Mitch O'Farrell. He's just some old dude who nobody likes, so no one's knocking doors for him. So I'm feeling good about Ugo, but everybody here should go to Ugo's website and volunteer.
Yeah. Okay, Dave, what's going on? You left Washington Post. You're still roaming the nation. You're still going around. We got a lot of people in here. The midterms are happening tomorrow. Do you want to give us like a lineup of what are some of the races that you're excited about? What do you think are interesting? And what are the chances of the Democratic Party in the national stage? I'm sure everyone asks you this question nonstop, but we're no different here.
Oh yeah, it was really tough. I was at a live event with an audience that was very liberal, and they were asking me how Wisconsin looked, and I said, "Well, it looks." I was in Maryland. I said, "It looks great in Maryland," and everyone started to boo or make noises. They made unhappy noises. Like there's just not a lot going right for Democrats right now. We're at the stage where I've read 2 memos from groups. The election's tomorrow. 2 memos, one from a moderate Democratic group, one from a progressive group, already saying, well, this is why we lost. And they didn't lose yet. I mean, they'll probably lose tomorrow. But, they're looking at this for as bad as everything is going, they're looking at a good election of maybe losing 20 House seats, keeping the Senate even at best, losing a couple state legislatures, losing a couple governor's races at best. And then if Republicans actually do turn up on Election Day and overwhelm all their turnout, then all kinds of stuff they could lose. I mean, just stuff in California that was like plus 20 Biden, they're worried they could lose it.
Is there a world in which the Democrats just knock it out of the gates as far as what you've seen? I mean, you've been running around.
Yeah,
You see any law signs?
So Democrats, things got weird if you cover Democrats in person, because 2016 there was not as much energy as they wanted. 2018 they corrected that, right? Everywhere. I mean, I remember being in Southern California and just Katie Hill would need some people to help out, and 100 people would show up. And then the pandemic happened, so a lot of Democrats still are not back out in force at the doors. Not a lot. I mean, it's been declining month by month. They kind of got their ground game back, but not as overwhelming as it used to be compared to Republicans. I mean, Republicans have, and people have written about this for 2 years, bound together every conservative movement that's been happening, whether it's people are angry about their critical race theory. Remember that one? I mean, that's just fate is an issue. The new one is they're teaching our kids about gender and sex at school. Those movements are unifying, like the churches where people are already getting organized, kind of conservative groups that didn't have much money and got startup capital at the start of 2021. They've got all these conservative causes that are working very well together. I don't see the same thing happening for Democrats. The coalition's actually stayed together pretty good considering how much stuff Biden promised that he didn't get to do. But it's conservatives have a really motivated base, and then the voter in the middle who just is angry at the way things are right now, just inflation and crime, whether it happened to them or whether they're hearing about it. Those voters just have been moving to Republicans in the last couple weeks. Every Democrat says, yeah, like we won moderates last time, we're not winning them now. That could screw us in a lot of places. Yeah.
So the top issues, as we've seen time and time again, is inflation and crime. Those two are substituting. Do you feel like the abortion conversation kind of moved away from the forefront? Like people are no longer really mobilizing as actively as they were, and it's definitely not like a point of consideration, unlike maybe in places where it's on the ballot, right? Directly on the ballot.
The difference I found in places like California, it's become less of an issue where people are pretty confident. I mean, the governor is going to win again. Democrats are going to win most of the statewide races. They're not worried about abortion being banned in California. They're not worried about it in New York. I mean, you've got in New York, Lee Zeldin literally saying, "Don't worry, I'm not going to sign anything. I'm not going to change the law," even though he is pro-life, even though he's co-sponsored all the federal laws. So it's blue and purple states and some red states where it's up in the air. So you got Arizona, where there's this abortion a law on the books, like from before it was a state, when it was a territory, that would go into effect. Total ban on abortion. It was in place parts of 2022, got a lot of attention. That stayed really in front of people there. It stayed in front of people in Michigan. In some places where people, Oklahoma and Kansas, places where maybe people weren't thinking that would be an issue there, it has stayed really active. And it's still motivating people everywhere. I mean, help Democrats raise a ton of money, and there are voters, and I meet them, who are like, I'm unhappy, but Republicans have gone so far right so fast, I'm going to vote unexcitedly for a Democrat this time. So the abortion thing is like help more than it is. Had that not happened, I think they'd be in worse shape.
It would have been a complete
blowout. The thing, though, is like to break it down, though, like if Republicans have a good election after getting rid of Roe, I do wonder. The only reason any Republican was like, well, I'm in this party, but I might want to get rid of Roe. Only reason they hesitated is, well, what'll happen if we do that? There's going to be a huge backlash. We're going to lose all these seats. And if they don't, I do think they're going to push the envelope in a lot more places and a lot more issues, saying, well, the media said there'd be a backlash, and there wasn't.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, part of the reason why the backlash has not happened in the way that people foresaw it could was I remember reading an article a couple months ago where it read like an Onion article, basically, where I think it was on Politico, where it was like, Republicans shocked Democrats are just standing back and not really doing anything to defend abortion rights. Like they didn't have a plan of action. It seemed like they were just running on it.
Yeah.
And it was a little confusing for a lot of people, where it was like, okay, so you're not going to do anything about it? Like you're going to, at the national level, you're going to say that you're going to potentially, fund some federal initiatives to like transport people out of states, like out of red states, which of course is going to be a measure that'll get held up in courts regardless, no matter what happens. So it does feel like the Democratic Party is underperforming even if your expectations for the Democratic Party were low overall. One of the things that I find particularly interesting is that the Senate forecast, according to 538 at least, has changed for the Raphael Warnock debate, in the aftermath of the Raphael Warnock Herschel Walker debate, where Herschel Walker is now slightly favored to win the Georgia Senate election according to 538's estimations. I find that to be crazy, personally. What do you think was like a big reason for why that happened?
People are just really partisan right now. In anything except the race for governor or mayor's race, you're seeing this in LA, right? Where there are a lot of Democrats who are going to vote for Rick Caruso, who became a Democrat this year, who could go to the Reagan Library and see Rick Caruso's name on the wall. Like, they don't care as much about partisanship in some races. For anything federal, though, they are locked in. So when Walker was at his absolute weakest, he was polling at like 45, 46%. Like every Republican in Georgia said, don't care. I don't care what you can tell me about him. I'm going to vote for him. And that's basically it. It has written. So there are years when Republicans are feeling good and they nominate like the most electable candidates they can. Electable, what's that mean? But generally speaking, somebody who's won some elections, somebody who they know doesn't screw things up. Who hasn't had had multiple abortions.
Yeah, Herschel Walker is not one of those people.
Like yes. Right. And so in a year like this, you'd think. I mean, he is running like Brian Kemp is winning by like 8 or 9. Herschel's in a dead heat. He's definitely shaving points because he's got so many flaws, and that is the beauty from their perspective of a wave. Is there's going to be people who have done really yeoman work to lose votes and to alienate people, but enough voters will say, you know what, I don't like it, but I just went shopping again, and the sausages that were $4 4 years ago, they're $8 now, and I just got to vote for this guy. I mean, the inflation will change if Congress changes, I think. I'm going to vote for that. It's really locked in like that. It's really every candidate I've been talking to this week too. It's you cannot change. People have great ideas about messaging, but you can't change all the other inputs they're getting, and that's both the real stuff like prices, the annoying stuff like crises that come and go, like the supply chain, and then just you're bombarded with videos of crime pretty frequently. If you turn on the news or you're like right like Reddit group, you're saying, oh, look at this criminal. I'm pretty worried about this. I'm not even trying to be glib about it. Like I've had in LA, I've had not amazing experience. The last one was just I was walking to get coffee. Somebody with some mental problems like confronted me and started yelling at me. I said something and I didn't say anything negative. I moved out of the way to harass somebody else. That sort of thing in like a campaign scan says this city is Mad Max. It's falling apart. You gotta replace this leadership. That's kind of what's been happening. Like you can't just like run an ad and be like, hey, maybe it's not
that big of an issue. Yeah. Mm-hmm. You're right about that. I think a lot of people do see it, and they think that like this is caused by Mad Max style crime is now legal policies that the liberals are pushing for is what the local media presents it as. So I think a lot of people have like both seen it in their own personal lives and also simultaneously don't think deeper into like what the root cause of these issues are, and no one is out there communicating that or even trying to solve it as a consequence of complex funding mechanisms that have basically been the reason for why this kind of thing happens anyway, people being priced out of the housing market, as we talked about extensively when we were discussing California-specific ballot measures and problems happening here. I'm seeing that even someone as fucking annoying and unbearable as J.D. Vance is looking incredibly favored to win the Ohio Senate election here. 538 putting it at 86 in 100. That is pretty wild. I mean, that's wild, especially because Tim Ryan is this guy who there's been all these articles like Tim Ryan is showing Democrats how to win. Like he's doing the whatever. Like there's been a big part of his narrative. Him and Fetterman were like touted as these are the guys who are showing the new way forward. So that number is chilling. What do you think about Ohio?
They're doing the best they can. I mean, the Ryan strategy was just being a Northeast Ohio Democrat who talks about bringing manufacturing back all the time, and attacks China. He did everything the Democrats did when they would win Ohio by like 3 or 4 points. All of it he did. What happened there? I think I guess I could have like a stamp that says inflation and crime. Like every race, those things have been hitting people. And the way they tried to go after Ryan in Ohio effectively wasn't just he's a phony. It was he's tied to those national Democrats who do all those things you don't like. And Ryan ran for president in 2020. So 2019 is the primary. He's done by the end of 2019. And while he was running for president, he took like a couple positions, like literally 3 minutes worth of video footage of saying things that he doesn't say now. For example, he would ask him, "Hey, would you cut the prison population in half?" And he'd say yes. Or he would talk about energy independence and like the green future. Like you're campaigning for president, it's not even that you're a phony, but he was running on more liberal things that he's running in Ohio. And they kind of grabbed those, they put them on the air. I think that did some damage with the voters in Northeast and Southeast Ohio who were like, well, what I'm hearing of Tim Ryan in 2022 sounds pretty good. They made sure they said, well, but back in 29, he told this liberal that he wants to get rid of cash bail.
Yeah,
like that sort of thing. That was pretty effective.
The joke is like if the First Step Act was pushed under the Biden administration, like if the exact same act was like signed into law by a Democratic president, they would consider Joe Biden to be like releasing rapists and murderers into the streets, which of course is not the case. And the abolition of cash bail is not the case. And yet the media has routinely amplified this narrative that like you are releasing like a person who just killed someone with a gun back onto the fucking streets immediately, or you're releasing like, multiple times rapists, like serial rapists back into the fucking streets. Like they're making it seem as though, there's a major crime wave and the Democrats are responsible and these like supposedly progressive DAs are responsible for it as well. And that has been very prescient. People believe it.
There's also a conflation of crime and disorder. Like, Dave, your story about crime with the guy yelling at you, that wasn't a crime. You experienced a mentally ill person who had no services, which, of course, like I saw that happen, at least in LA, after the pandemic. The pandemic made a huge amount of that happen. Or crime has gone up. Some crimes have gone up in some places.
Yeah,
They're
homicides.
often happening in black and brown communities.
Yeah,
like,
homicides.
The homicides are not happening in fucking, Beverly Hills or, et cetera. But the narrative is like more powerful than the reality. Like the people who are angriest about this they're not the victim. More crimes are not happening to them on average. There's a couple big cases, like the fucking Rugged executive's wife who was shot in the face, and there's like the general disorder. But it's like it's more narrative than reality is how it seems to me.
Yeah, that's why I brought that story, because like I was fine. I went and got coffee and like called into a meeting, and I lived my life. But you can tell that sort of thing is happening in other parts of the country or people hear that it happened to their friend. I mean, I wrote this story last week about every Republican I was covering in except for Kari Lake actually in Arizona was talking about the threat of fentanyl going to kids on Halloween. Right? And like you can choose to inflate this stuff. You can choose to say there's an invisible monster coming and we need the invisible monster spray to get rid of it, which was what the fentanyl thing was. With the crime stuff, it is based on a lot of reality, and you do have the choice. Like I think what hurt though factually was the crime went up. I mean, like the timing, you can say it's the timing of a lot of the reformers getting elected and having time and implementing during a pandemic. But I mean, I covered Larry Krasner, who's running for re-election. He wins. He's saying, like, look, civil society shut down. It's not that I'm doing things differently. I'm also dealing with a police department that is trying, slowing things down because they want me out of office. That's very tough. It's a very tough thing to tell people. And because things got a little bit worse after high-profile changes to the criminal justice system and policing, that connection was made. It was made the not infinite, probably billions of dollars worth of free Fox News media telling it to people. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like if you see something kind of going wrong, it's because Democrats changed the law and they let the criminals out.
The worst part about it is that like in so many circumstances across the board, in every state and in every city, police were not actually defunded. Like defund the police is a good. I think it's a good conversation to have. About the propaganda and how effective it is, right? Defund the police was not a real thing that ever happened. It was activist-based. Democrats immediately said, we're not doing that. What we're going to do instead is, 8 can't wait, which is another measure that was going to federalize some like pretty common sense things like chokehold bans and whatnot. They couldn't even push that. They could not even actually do that. And then the crime wave narrative, captivated so many local markets. People really trust their local news broadcasters. Local news broadcasters are completely aligned with police unions in this respect. And they're beefing up this narrative. They're talking about the crime wave. When you look at the statistics, it's like 2019 era crime is still lower. It's higher than it was when everyone was locked down, certainly, but not in a way that like it's the 90s murder spree.
Yeah, in some places, some crimes have gone up 4 to 6%, something like that. If you compare it to the 80s, the overall crime rate per 1,000 people is like half of what, I don't know, I don't have it in front of me, but it's like the line just goes down.
Yeah,
like what we're going through right now doesn't even show as a little up.
Yeah, but people don't even view it as that because they're responding to things that they see right in front of them. That's why they believe in psychotic shit like fentanyl-laced candy and Halloween.
The crazy thing about the fentanyl thing is that look, there's tons of like moral panics about your kids are doing XYZ on Halloween, but fentanyl actually, like a kid died in LA from taking fentanyl at school that they thought was a Xanax, but like fentanyl is like, it's realer than most of that shit that like right wingers come up with about Halloween. That's the odd thing about it to me.
Yeah. But I guess the point I was going to make is that like defund the police is not a real thing that actually happened in any meaningful capacity in any of these like liberal safe havens either. It just, maybe they shaved off like 1% of the additional funding that the police were going to get for their overtime pay or whatever, right? And they're still getting like, $2 billion in a budget. And yet cops who are notoriously not, the best, especially in big cities at solving crime, or doing things that you would expect them to do because you watch a lot of movies about cops, are just basically using that as an out to say, well, it's because you're embarrassing us. It's because you're making our jobs harder by saying we're doing a bad job. And also because you've defunded us. And that narrative stuck. And there's nothing we can do. I am genuinely fearful that we're in our 90s era again with like the Willie Horton ads are so commonplace now that it's not even a thing. Like, how many Willie Horton style ads have you seen on the campaign trail where it's like they just straight up will send mailers of like photos of black people to be like, these are black people that have been released under, the liberal progressive DAs back into the streets.
Yeah, you just said that something I've been thinking as I've bounced between these states is that like 10 years ago, crime was lower. But also there was just kind of like a social idea that if we're a campaign and our ads are showing scary criminals beating people up, and they're all black especially, that's going to backfire on us. So if we show a black candidate and here's some criminals in the background, well, that's going to backfire. And I pulled like the Republican platform in 2016, which, they don't update it in 2020. They have criminal justice reform language in there. There was just like a different consensus that people thought was we're hopeful was going to last. Okay,
shit.
fewer people in
we
prison.
just lost you for a second.
Oh, no.
Sorry. You're back.
I'm still here.
The chat could hear you, but I couldn't.
I'm just saying, but anyway, like the attitude changed. So like there was a lot more nervousness about looking like you're panicking about crime in like a racist way. And that definitely vanished this cycle. Articles are written about it, right? Articles will say, hey, why are your ads like have a black criminal, then the picture of the black candidate you're running against. But there wasn't much worry about a backlash. And it was happening as Republicans are doing a little bit better, depending on the state, with black voters, Asian voters. Asian voters are a big part of this, and Hispanic voters, and just making this appeal that's like, hey, you're an Asian voter in Queens, you're an Asian voter in Orange County. You see this crime that's happening. It was there the willingness to be explicit and show pictures of criminals and say this is coming for you. I think that is significant because you just had, you can find it online, but the paid media that like consultants would say, all right, I'm sign the back of this check, I'm going to do this. We're doing a new ad about this. There just was a little bit more tact about it. And we've gone full. You mentioned Willie Horton. It is like there's a million Willie Hortons all over the country. Arizona, where I was last week, Citizens for Sanity, I know you're familiar with this group. It's like a new conservative PAC. Their thing is just super hard-edged ads all about crime, and there's billboards that show immigrants at the border and says Mark Kelly equals open borders.
Okay, it's happening.
They have
again.
ads that show the crime.
Well,
they show
chat can
they
hear
have
you,
ads
but we
that
can't.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Sorry, it's like a Discord issue that happens every now and then.
All right.
You said
okay.
Willie Horton ads
I'm just
everywhere.
making more examples though, but yeah, you got the point.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter because at least they can hear you. The audience can hear you. It's just me and Adam can't for
good.
some weird reason. I don't know.
Oh,
how
dang. Okay.
It's a Discord related issue.
Mm-hmm.
But But yeah, I fear that the backlash from that is going to resemble the 90s like crime panic and the subsequent legislative agenda that changes like into somehow making the American criminal justice system even more brutal. I don't know how you would make the current criminal justice system more brutal than it actually is, but we are definitely moving away from like rehabilitation, which never was really a consideration to begin with, I think. But like, even if you were straight up like, I want to fund the police, I love cops as a Democrat, and then you like voted on the First Step Act alongside Donald fucking Trump, Republicans are literally cutting ads saying you are, you want to hug and kiss criminals and you want, the Boston bomber to come back and do Boston bombing 2, the marathon bombing 2. Like it's just fucking psychotic. I don't know. I don't know what to do about it. I don't know what the implications of that are going to be on the legislative side. Are you trying to leave right now?
No. I was gonna say it's so heartbreaking for criminal justice reform advocates who like on Adam Ruins Everything. We did like 2 or 3 episodes about this. It felt like there was a movement building. Prison reform, mass incarceration. Conservatives hated it because mass incarceration is so expensive and it's wasteful. And hey, there's a better way to do this. They were starting to gain steam. Then George Floyd happened. He was murdered. And there's the movement and the protests, and oh my God, it seemed like something would actually change, and then nothing was passed anywhere. And then the backlash has been 10 times bigger than the George Floyd moment was like 2 months long, and the backlash has been in the continuous 2.5 years since. And it's been more powerful than the initial. It makes me think a lot about Rick Perlstein's book Nixon Land, which is all about mostly about the forgotten history of the backlashes against all of the civil rights movement in the 60s, and how that brought us Nixon and Ronald Reagan. And it sure feels like that to me. And when I talk to those people now who do that work, they're fucking heartbroken about it, because they're it's like their life's work, and just at the moment that they thought we were going to make progress, it's suddenly slipping away in this disastrous way.
One thing that I will say, as far as messaging goes, one thing that I will say is that I feel like Democrats are hyper-focused on the national level, and the media is amplifying this narrative when it comes to election deniers. They're like, oh my God, there are so many election deniers that are on the ballot. They're all running. I think it's more than half, or if not half, of the Republicans running at the national level and at the state level, and at the local levels is literally just straight up saying that the election was stolen by Democrats. And I personally think that is maybe a motivator for some of the wealthy moderates that you are trying to shift away from the Republican Party. You're trying to pick away from the Republican Party. Redo the same working strategy for the Democratic Party in the past general election. But overall, I think that they haven't addressed inflation or even combated how Republicans would even address inflation, because Republicans are not saying anything. They're not talking about how their obstructionist policies in the Senate and in the House of Representatives, if they were to take full control over both of those places in Congress, what they would do to even combat inflation. They have not brought anything up. They just keep saying, look at how bad the prices are. That's Joe Biden's fault. And the Democrats aren't running, in my opinion, a counter narrative to that, and instead trying to elevate the Pied Piper strategy style. Look at how extremist the Republicans are. You should still vote for us for sanity narrative. And I don't know if that's going to create a winning coalition.
Well, the thing, can you hear me again?
I can hear you.
The thing you're talking about too, the fish doesn't know what water is. We're talking about a media environment that has changed a lot because of endless campaign spending and focused on the stuff we've been talking about. I was talking about the tone, but the Pennsylvania Senate race is going to be I think $200 million in spending. Midterms overall are in the billions, and a lot of that has been just the freedom of post Speech Now, Citizens United, post the Supreme Court cases, freedom of people to say, let's throw $10 million into this. The aggregate effect is it changes what is covered, and I'm in the media, so I've been thinking, okay, this is what's happening in these races, but what is happening that's more important? What is happening? Is this true? What's in the ad? That's pretty easy. But what overall is happening is that the narrative, the stories that people are hearing are changing from what might be a policy to fight inflation to crime and to or did you just support to fund the police or not? Are you going to build more jails or not? You can put more people in. You can change what voters are focused on. There's a reason people spend all this money to advertise, because it is nonstop. And you go to a swing state or Arizona or Pennsylvania, you hear about inflation, but not really a discussion of what should be done about it. You hear about crime constantly, the individual cases of crime, and it's kind of, if you think inflation is important, it must be annoying, because there's no conversation about would cutting taxes increase inflation, because that's kind of a Republican plan. Do Democrats have some plan that would they raise taxes? That also might do it. They don't want to talk about it. It's kind of hard to get into, so everyone just has to go with the flow of this distorting campaign money. I mean, I was just talking to one candidate where they, in the last month, the race got close because $10 million went into a PAC against them. I choose the 10 million not at random. It was really to their surprise, it went from zero to that, and so they were on the defensive about crime all month. And like, if your party's in good shape, it doesn't matter. But like, very little substance about what you're talking about, because like, why the ads? Why would they have substance in them at all? What would be the point of running an ad saying there are different perspectives on how to combat inflation? It's much easier to be like, you see this guy, he got mugged.
Yeah, no, for sure. They're very good at agitated propaganda and cutting agitated propaganda. It's not that, like, if the Democrats talked about all the complicated ways in which they would combat inflation, that would be adequate campaigning either. You need to also make that short, quippy, and concise. And that's why I literally said, like, one of the things they could have at least done is like be like, hey, these guys are stopping us from pushing legislation. What makes you fucking think that they're going to be good in the next 2 years if they control the Congress in its entirety? Like, you know, something as simple as that, even. But overall, what is your opinion on Pennsylvania? Because we have some major races, right? We got Pennsylvania, we got Georgia, Nevada. We have a lot of different Senate battlegrounds. It does seem like the House of Representatives it's not even a toss-up. It hasn't really seemed like a toss-up at all, even with the abortion and stuff. It seems like Republicans are going to win back control of the House. What do you think about Pennsylvania? Let's start there.
Yeah, that got rough for Democrats in the Senate race because John Fetterman had a stroke. I mean, that's what happened. So the Fetterman campaign had a brilliant strategy and a brilliant message with their candidate, a guy who was very hard to pin down, unique, like people like knew him, liked him. He was very blunt. He's never been like a great orator. When he was on the rise as mayor of Braddock, you could say he was had TED Talks or whatever, and he just did not talk like a politician, which people liked. And the stroke took that ability away from him. So they've really tried to just grind out the election, saying, yes, he had a stroke. Yes, he's lost some of his ability to speak for now. He's going to get better, and he's running on the same stuff. But that complicated their thing. Their thing. That complicated what they were trying to do. The governor's race there was no complication. So Josh Shapiro is running for governor, the attorney general. Both parties expect him to win. I'm already seeing how far can this guy go? Can this guy be the first Jewish president? People are getting a little bit ahead of themselves, but they feel very good about that race for governor.
That's so. That is the most Democratic Party thing you can do. Oh my God! Like
that's all that matters to you. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, but the rest of the state, there's like 4 seats that they voted for Biden. 3 voted for Biden, 1 voted narrowly for Trump. The one in Scranton is the one that voted for Trump. The one in Allentown was narrow, and then there's like 2 in Pittsburgh that are competitive. And that's one where Democrats are hopeful they can hold all those, but like they're going to start losing 1 or 2 state places like that from state to state. The places where they're more worried are districts that Biden and Hillary won by like 15, 20 points, where the incumbent has just like never had to really run a tough race. They're less worried about the guy in Scranton Matt Cartwright, because he always has to run against this red wave, like of some size in his district. But they're more worried about the people. I mean, Summerlee in Pittsburgh, for example, that's a plus 20 Biden seat. She's had this issue where she's replacing Mike Doyle, a Democratic congressman who's there for 28 years. Republicans nominated this local city councilman named Mike Doyle. They've been kind of cute about that and blurring who they are, but also just that is combined with the fact that Summerlee is very progressive, is on the record for defund the police as a path to eventual, to justice, to less crime and all that. But she's on record saying that. And those kind of races where it's like it's a safe seat, so they never really looked over their shoulder what Republicans could use against them. Those are the ones that are getting really dicey.
Yeah. As far as okay, so we talked about Pennsylvania. Do you have a? I mean, this is like such shitty questioning, but do you think Fetterman is after that debate performance? Do you think like Fetterman might actually lose to Dr. Oz? Because at this point, the reason why I'm asking you this question is because I always have been of the mindset that, like, first of all, people like the general vibes of John Fetterman. Like, that was, I like his politics for the most part. You know, there are some things I disagree with, but and I've liked him for a long time. But I think the American voter usually just thinks about, like, you know, vibes, and John Fetterman fits that, or you know, John Fetterman before the stroke definitely fit that. Can his ground game overcome the potential, like, millions, multiple millions of dollars of free coverage, free negative coverage that he has gotten from Fox News, calling him a cyborg, saying his tumor is like a totally separate person, and claiming that he's actually fake, like he doesn't even really wear Carhartt, like he's not like a real working class guy, because he was foolishly interested in like uplifting Braddock instead of working for like some corporate lobbying firm before putting on the snakeskin boots like fucking Ted Cruz. You know what I mean? Because he's a Harvard graduate.
Well, the other thing is, had there been no stroke, the campaign would have been, this guy's a phony, and it was going to be, and they did some of this. Like, he's from a rich family, and he's never hidden that. He's like, yeah, I mean, people from rich families, my family helped me out in doing this work to build a small town. That was part of the story, but they were trying to brand him as like this rich kid who never really done anything. I don't think that would have been as effective. If he wins, he's still much better liked than Oz with you know, hate saying depends who turns out, because duh. But every poll, Oz is just, people do not like the fact that this guy who does not live in Pennsylvania moved there to run for Senate. They don't get it. He's not, as a campaigner, he's like kind of mediocre. He doesn't do, he's done a couple of events, but he's been very shy, like doing a little round table that maybe the press is invited to, maybe it isn't, but he's not been out there like barnstorming and impressing people. So it's really, yes, you said the ground game. Democrats have all the money they need there. Fetterman's been out everywhere. It's like, do they say, okay, you guys don't really want to elect Dr. Oz? I know things are bad, but you guys really don't want to just for 6 years have this senator that you all agree you think is terrible. So just look past Fetterman's injury. Look at it almost like he's laid up with an injury. It happens to people. That's a strategy. I think it can still work. I mean, I feel like if he is losing by any margin, it's because of the stroke. The fact that he's in the game right now suggests, like, yeah, they were right. Oz is so unpopular that you can get away with a couple mistakes and still compete. And still beat him.
This is a big, you know, it's not even a mistake. It's just, you know, incredibly unfortunate.
Can I ask Dave a question? That I
I shouldn't be glib about it. Sorry.
I'm just curious, Dave.
I'm going to pee while you ask him a question.
Okay, cool. How do you deal with the fact that, like, it seems like for Democrats, everything happened at the wrong time, right? Like, I remember in the summer, it was like, oh, there was the funny thing with the crudité at the Wegners that was like really great, like one of the best viral campaign moments. It reminded me almost of like 2012 or something. It was like funny and fun, you know, and it obviously really helped Fetterman. Then there was abortion here in LA. Like, abortion seemed to suddenly be a big issue. Like, you know, in the Bass Caruso campaign, it was like, oh, Democrats are getting the wind in their sails. But a lot of it wasn't like the fundamentals. A lot of it was just like, oh, a bunch of like messaging came together at the right time. But it was like just 3 months too early, and now everyone's forgotten about the funny crudité, and you know, like, abortion's just a little bit less hot. Like, people are still mad about it, but it's like, oh, the news cycle has moved on and moved on and moved on and moved on. And like, I mean, how do you deal with that, like, in politics? Because it seems weird to me that so much should hinge on just like, oh, too bad that happened in August and not in October.
Yeah, but it does. I mean, I'm a materialist on this stuff. I'm not an idealist. I think it's the Republican strategy was, we're going to have mediocre candidates, and we're going to just bury Democrats with negative advertising in the fall. Democrats, the one thing that happened with Roe is that they, being overturned, is they got a lot of money donated to them right after that. And as cynical as people were, like, oh, what are you guys going to do with this? Their strategy was, all right, we are going to run ads and introduce the candidates and say, however you feel now, we're gonna build up our positives, and you're gonna have to knock them down. I mean, really, that's a lot of campaigns. Is if you have money, you introduce yourself immediately, you get yourself as well liked as possible, and the other team spends all of its money trying to destroy you. If it's a negative campaign, which they mostly are now, and so yeah, the timing. That's why I said if it turns out that like the Supreme Court can just overturn something in June of an election year, and then by November people are like, oh, that. Why are you bringing up something that happened a couple months ago?
Yeah.
That's great for conservatives. There's all kinds of stuff you can get rid of affirmative action next June.
Yeah.
And people might get angry. Then November will be like, I don't know. I'm really worried about this.
Because unless it impacted them personally,
it hasn't happened yet. Sorry, go ahead. I interrupted you.
Because unless it doesn't happen to them personally, it's easy to forget.
Yeah, and part of it, I've seen a little bit of this. Like, there's backlash. Not backlash. They're still voting Democratic, but there are Democratic voters who believe in their message and agree with them, and they're just annoyed, like, why do I have these abortion stories on my TV all the time instead of like something positive? Like, voters are temperamental. There's people who are lined up with a party, and then there's people who do want like the vibes to improve, and the vibes are controlled in large part by like what actually is happening, but then what is being manipulated in the conversation by all the advertising. So the Republican plan was, let's hope things are still pretty bad in October, and they were still pretty bad when it came to inflation and crime, and everything else just went from there. Even though it's very possible we get to next year, we have new FBI numbers, and crime was going down this year. I mean, anecdotally, I see that happening as people go back to work.
It doesn't seem like the numbers matter that much because the narrative seems more powerful than that. Okay, I gotta go. It was great being here.
Thank you, Adam.
Great seeing you, Dave.
Yeah, no, good to see you again. See you around.
Adam Conover of Adam Ruins Everything. And also, is there anything you want to plug before you leave?
Yeah. I got a podcast called Factually. I interview people every single week. And I got a new YouTube video. Oh, you watched it on your stream.
I did, yeah. It was great.
Follow me on YouTube and listen to my podcast Factually. See you, everybody.
All right, bye. Okay. So I have some more questions here, specifically about. Hold on, let me just fix this up a little bit. Specifically, one of the things I wanted to talk to you about is like the election denier narrative as a narrative. I think is not very strong, but I am genuinely worried that we are basically gearing up for every election cycle where if it doesn't go the way of the Republican Party. They are just going to say that it's cheating. There's cheating going on, which is not all that different from the narrative that Republicans used to promote all the time about voter fraud. That you have to create a narrative of voter fraud being rampant and happening all the time so you can actually create some suppressive mechanism so you can justify voter suppression, which is truly happening, right? But lately it's gotten to a point where they're just straight up like making it so that, like in the state of Pennsylvania, you can't actually count votes that were already coming in, in the month ahead of time, so that there is this narrative of like red mirage, as we talked about in the 2020 election, where Republicans are seemingly winning, and then all of a sudden they're not, and that must mean that there is some corruption going on, some cheating happening. I feel like that is deliberate, and I do worry that even in Democrats' chances do not look great at the moment. But if they were, I do fear that there will be some major backlash, and that backlash is pretty much built into the system at this point by Republicans. Do you see any of that on the ground?
Yeah, Pennsylvania is the best example where you could just change the law. Like the Republicans could just change the law and say, hey, we're going to do this like Florida where you can process in advance and you count fast. It's really aggravating because, as a reporter, you don't want to just be... No one actually does the Aaron Sorkin reporter thing. Like, you, sir, are telling a lie, sir. You don't do that in person to them, but with this stuff, it's so egregious where you know what you could do. It's not a mystery. You don't need to commission. How can we count? You count the votes. You process the votes when they come in first, and you don't have this worry because we all have to kind of watch this in the press as we go through election night. We know some counties are bad at this. Some counties are early. I mean, I'll talk to a campaign and for this run up, and they'll say, we just want to get ahead of this because we're absolutely sure we're going to be like down when the first 3 counties come in because our strength is this county, and there is a delay at the office. Like, it is being degraded to make it worse. This is kind of this works in a lot of ways, right? If you want people to not trust independent negative media coverage of your party, you're like, well, you just don't trust them. They let's throw up a lot of dust so that everyone thinks they're lying. And if you want people to trust the election system, oh well, just here's a video that we've seen a million times of like a box being moved. That's actually a photo of video of ballots. I find as a reporter, it's just deathless. You can't convince people, and in the media, you can't convince people because they assume the media is in on it. So once people got that information loop, the voters, I don't blame that many voters for believing false things about the election because they're being fed it all the time. I do get annoyed at the legislators who could just fix it. I mean, like, there's just ways to fix it that other places have done. They just don't do it. But Pennsylvania's pretty bad on that. Wisconsin's not as bad. There are, like, New York Democrats and California Democrats make everybody take away the ammo for this argument because they control everything in these states and the election systems are still awful. But with, like, Republicans, they could fix it, and they just are not doing it.
Yeah, Pennsylvania is the specific one I use because, like, for those of you who don't know in the chat, like, as Dave also pointed out, they are counting these votes, or they could count these votes that are coming in already and then release it on election night so that everybody knows where the early votes went, right? But they refuse to do so deliberately and hold back on counting those votes and releasing that information specifically so that the Republicans look like they have an upper hand, an advantage. The Republicans also campaign on it. They openly state that they want people not to vote early and vote same day voting, which normally in under different circumstances that would be a negative. That you're not allowing ease of access to voting for your for a potential block of voters that could maybe easily vote for you. But part of the reason why I think they're doing that is also because it's probably easier to purge some of the cast ballots already, like they're doing in Pennsylvania. Again, there's something related to the dates, I believe, on like ballots that were sent in already, that it didn't say the date of the election outside of the ballot, even though these people have already received their fucking votes and have voted before the election day, so it doesn't even matter. But they're still trying to take down, knowing full well that early voters are overwhelmingly Democratic. They're trying to declare void hundreds of thousands of ballots that have been cast already in early voting.
Yeah, I think that's you have to. This happens in a lot of states. You have to date the ballot, and if it's not, there's an effort to throw it out.
Yeah.
Democrats still control the highest court in Pennsylvania. Usually, when stuff gets kicked up there, usually they allow some of this to be counted. But that too, I mean, what I found with all this, I kind of throw my hands up in despair because as soon as it gets a little bit complicated, people who just assume that the elections are stolen are like, well, this is all a bunch of gobbledygook you guys are saying to cover up the fact that we should just be voting on paper ballots and we should all vote in one day on paper ballots and that would fix the problem. And it's compelling, right? Because you see Brazil count stuff fast, and you think, why can't we just do that? I don't think they're crazy. I think what you just need is everyone to agree. The problem that is obvious that I don't want to get too like wonky in international politics on you. Who wants that? But like other countries have federal election systems. We have every county and every precinct doing its own election, and it takes a while to count. But what we've had instead of an attempt to fix that as much as you can, because you're always going to have independent counties doing this, is Republicans deciding it is just it is worth it to not have it fixed, and Democrats just being bad at fixing it. So we're heading into this, like, at this point, like hell, every election, every time there's enough stuff on the ballot to be that's going to be close, every election we're just like, well, this is going to take a couple weeks. There's going to be death threats to the county officials. There's going to be people with guns and cameras outside the polling place. There's going to be other people trying to protest them. Like, it was not that stupid 4 years ago. It got stupid like on purpose because people thought it would advantage them if everyone thought the elections were rigged unless they won. That's totally what happened.
Yeah, it was definitely it was definitely also in some ways the logical conclusion to arrive at if you have, since the Paul Weyrich days, used voter suppression as a tool to win elections. in some way, or at least like make it more competitive for your party. And in order to, like I said, justify voter suppression mechanisms and like purging people from voter rolls and whatnot, you have to make it seem like voter fraud is rampant, despite all evidence pointing to the exact opposite, despite the fact that even Republicans like George W. Bush and Donald Trump, both winners, have created like election integrity committees, and then they quietly get disbanded when they can't come up with the voter fraud narrative that they're claiming.
Yeah, this is what it's always useful to go out after an election and just say what happened to that thing, like so, or after any story. So I feel like it's helpful to go back after the fentanyl panic and say, wait a second, was there actually fentanyl in candy or not? There was reporting
Immigrant
in Virginia
caravan.
where people
Remember
caravan, but people
Yeah.
in Virginia, I forget who, I think. I forget which paper. I think it was Richmond Times Dispatch, but they basically just did a Freedom of Information search for the critical race theory tip line that Glenn Youngkin brought in when he was governor, and it turns out they gave up on it because nobody was actually reporting this stuff, or the election fraud stuff that nobody goes back. And that's a good use of the media. And like I think a general story that everybody loves is, hey, you were being lied to by people trying to scare you for your vote. That's a good story. It's just a post-election story that we're gonna have to say afterwards. I don't know how to fix it in real time because people just want to believe. But people do want to believe the worst, and it helps to believe the worst. You're like, oh, okay, I trust that those guys are right. You're right, though. I'd heard it for years. I mean, I remember covering Republican stuff in 2010, and I'd meet voters who thought Obama's election was stolen because they heard about Acorn on Fox. Right, that always happens.
Oh,
it's
yeah.
just every single candidate saying the system sucks. And when we're losing, it's because they stole it. Like everyone's saying that on the record. That is new. That is and I don't know how much of it is opportunistic for voters. I don't know how much people believe it. I assume if you're a politician, you're saying it in public. I don't think it matters that much if you don't believe it. You're attaching yourself to the idea, and often when you know that it's fake.
Yeah. Oh, Arizona. Speaking of voter fraud, what do you? I mean, it seems like out of the Peter Thiel candidates that were put forward, the school shooter candidate Blake Masters is doing the worst. I mean, in comparison to J.D. Vance somehow. I liken J.D. Vance in Ohio to Ted Cruz. Ohio is red. They're going to vote for the biggest goober. It doesn't even fucking matter because he's red and they're red and they don't give a shit. And Tim Ryan is not like charismatic enough to be like the singular voice for people that would otherwise like switch over and vote for a Democrat. Like they're voting for someone exactly like Ted Cruz who just sucks, right? He's like not very charismatic, but it doesn't matter because he's red and people vote on, party lines across the board. Blake Masters, on the other hand, in Arizona, is not doing so great. Not doing great at all, as a matter of fact, and hasn't at all. Why do you think that happened?
Well, it's a better state for Democrats at the moment is like the main thing. So Arizona got more competitive because a lot of people move in all the time. It's affordable. Not just young Latino voters, but you're getting more college educated, white, black, brown voters coming in. They've been voting Democratic once they got organized. Latino vote there is very well organized. So Democrats are in just better shape to start with in Arizona. They also had a good contrast with Mark Kelly, who he's an astronaut. Gabby Gifford's husband. He's one of those guys when you do like a paragraph describing him, everything is positive, which is kind of rare. I guess he's bald or something. Maybe you want to go negative.
Oh,
okay,
but hey now.
I'm not going negative. I'm saying I've seen Republicans attack Mark Kelly on the stage. It's like they will call him bald or short. That's it. That's all you got. So like people like the guy. And Masters Masters took Peter Thiel's class in college, took notes on it, turned that into working for Thiel and co-writing his book, which I've read actually, 0 to 1, which is a pretty good business book. If you are starting a business 20 years ago and have an idea for a cool tech monopoly, definitely read the book. But Masters just introduced himself as, I'm a guy who lives in Tucson and I'm fed up with people who are not saying, and then insert Tucker Carlson monologue, right? The classic campaign where not classic, it's kind of new, but where somebody's saying the media won't let me say this, but I'm going to say things that anyone can hear anyone say on Fox News from like 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. or anyone can see on Reddit but basically translating the sort of based conservative, suck on this liberal rhetoric to a campaign. And like, most Arizonans are not that conservative. So like he locked down the conservative base. Introducing himself to voters who were not already conservative has been tricky. He took, as a libertarian teal guy, he took all these positions. Like he thinks it would be good to privatize Social Security at some point. He had a record of just extremely hot takes and posts, edgelord stuff, and Republicans roll your eyes when you say, "Oh, I shouldn't read this guy because you say he's racist." But he played a lot more with the far right of the Republican Party, just like the far right, the kind of Murray Rothbard libertarians. He just is more right wing than Arizona is. So his whole campaign has just been saying, "All right, now that I'm the nominee, if you're tired of the Democrats screwing up, put me in power. Like just punish them, put me in power. Don't worry about stuff I said during the primary."
I'm not kidding.
And then he'll go on Fox and say something, that gets that audience riled up. But his campaign in Arizona is just like, aren't you sick of the inflation and like the stuff they're doing? They'll slip in something like the correct amount of illegal immigration is 0. Or he'll slip in some idea that says he does want to go much further right. But when as a general election candidate, he's just like, look, you like my opponent. He was an astronaut. That's cool. But stay angry about material conditions and vote for me to get rid of him.
Yeah, I'm not kidding when I say that. I legitimately think he is just like too weird for regular like Arizonan conservatives to be like, yeah, I'm gonna vote for this guy. Like he's too nerdy on the econ stuff, which comes across no matter what because of the way he looks. He hyper focuses on the culture war shit, but he does it in such a calculated way that even somehow JD Vance looks more natural than he does, even though I can sense the lack of authenticity from JD Vance as well, because they are identical, like in many respects.
And Vance did join the Marines. He was like the public affairs department of the Marines. So he this does matter to people when you're introducing yourself. Like what? Again, that little paragraph. Mark Kelly, veteran, astronaut. Blake, JD Vance, author, veteran. Blake Masters, guy with website. I mean, it's just like it's never been as compelling.
Yeah. He's a huge nerd who likes to shoot guns. Like that's it. He doesn't have the bona fides. I don't know. He just is really weird. I don't know if you saw his locked and loaded 4 more days a tweet. This was 2 days ago.
The whole thing where it's he's been doing a lot of that. Like there's a lot of Blake Master videos. He goes.
He literally is saying, "Don't come to the polls tomorrow." I know that's not what he's doing. He's doing a ride along because if you zoom into the photo, you can see that that's like a cop's gun, right? I think he's doing a ride along at this point. But like, it's just he's just LARPing. He's LARPing, but not in the right ways. Like, it's not based. Groypers are not going out to fucking vote. Okay, they're all fantasizing about how they'll have gay sex with Paul Pelosi next. That's what base gropers are doing. Sorry, Dave, for saying that.
The base gropers are under 18 too, right? So
yeah, exactly. Well, no, the peepee was like 43. I think a lot of them are old now. So yeah, no, I don't even think that the base gropers are all that young. Really, it makes it much sadder when you think about it.
Yelling at Shia LaBeouf 6 years ago, you're definitely old enough to vote now. Yeah.
Yeah. No, they're definitely like they're behaving like they're 14, but they're not actually 14. Not that it matters. I don't think that like 4chan is in any way, shape, or form relevant in the grand scheme of things. And it wasn't even relevant back in 2016. What is a race that you don't think is getting a lot of national attention that could be a toss up that you think is unique or interesting or compelling?
Honestly, for national coverage, I feel like the LA races don't get enough attention. I mean, I talked about Hugo Soto Martinez's race when I jumped on, but like the situation where you might have a billionaire developer, tough on homelessness and crime mayor, and then a more socialist city council, that's interesting. I think in terms of the pure competitive stuff, I am interested in just how much Republicans can stretch the anger at. And the anger and the fear, it's more fear than anger, about crime in like the Pacific Northwest. So I went to Oregon a couple times, went to Washington, and you have just Republicans, again, doing this blue state thing where they say anything you're actually worried about, don't worry about it. We're not going to get in charge and ban abortion. But in like the Washington State Senate race, in the 3rd district, which is one of the January 6th defenders, beat one of the Republicans who impeached Trump. And then in all over Oregon, man, three of those races are close. I'm watching those really closely just to see if voters who just have been running away from the Republican Party, kind of like the ones who would have voted from the 2000 but never again, if they're snapping back. And I think everything else has been pretty well covered, right? Ohio was covered like crazy. I think everyone did a Tim Ryan profile, but I have nothing to add. That I think it's like the West and the Pacific, like California's got a lot of stuff that shouldn't be competitive, and if it is, like if Ventura and Central Valley get more competitive, like that's the stuff I'm watching. If a lot of people show up and they're like, you know what, I saw everything, heard everything. Trump's crazy, but I'm gonna vote for these Republicans right now. Those are the kind of the West Coast stuff is what I'm watching.
Which is, I mean, I mean, you mentioned Brazil, where elections are compulsory, and it's on a Sunday. We're having a midterm election on a Tuesday. Yeah. I wonder why. As we move further and further towards like just trying to mathematically target like the 8 people living in one specific suburb to swing an election, and they all have the exact same demographics and they all have the exact same background, and that's basically become like the main that's the way to win elections. Do you feel like a lot of these otherwise like blue safe havens are going to have more reactionary liberals that are a part of the homeowners associations that don't want to actually, vote for a progressive because it's like being paired up with the brain disease they're getting from the crime wave narrative?
Yeah, I think unlike 2017, I wrote a lot about this at the time, right? I had covered Bernie's campaign in 16, and then as soon as 16 was over, I thought it was striking. The Democrats like lost, but they didn't lose by much. They actually, gained in some races, and then they moved to the left. They never do that, and so I do think any loss this year, you already see people kind of, sharpening the knife to say, all right, now it's time to abandon some of these left wing ideas you guys were so into, and I think they're going to do that with. The people I'm thinking about here are not just the voters, but they're like the donors to the party, the donors to the super PACs and 501c3s who live in like the Bay Area, live in LA, live in New York, who really did have an influence here. They really said, like, to build the resistance against Donald Trump, we need to fund social justice movements, and Hillary lost because she didn't excite young people. If they change their minds, I feel like there's going to be a lot of interest in trying to get Democrats to drop stuff. The thing is, like, no one's really saying it. Like, no one's saying they must drop this. It's easy to say, don't say defund the police, find a different way to say it. But the stuff they did in the 90s, right, was, sorry about letting anyone out of jail. We are now the party that's going to hire 100,000 more cops, increase mandatory minimums. Like they just moved really to the right. And I don't know if the current Democratic Party can do that. I think it's going to be shaped like where they lose. If it's like Central Valley or like working class Oregon or like working class Illinois, if they lose those places, they're going to say, all right, let's go back to the polls. What do those people not like about us? And if they find out, they're like, oh, we think that you care too much about trans issues, or we think that you love criminals too much, and we think that you're too anti-drilling. There will be people who say, you heard them. We're now the party that's for all the above energy. We're now the party that, like, I don't know how they would do it or who would do it, but that's what I'm kind of looking for. That didn't happen in the last few cycles. Like they always moved right until 2016. I feel like that's over. Or sorry, they always move right. They move left, and I feel like the moving left is over.
Yeah, you and I are in the same mindset on this. I do think that we're going to see we're already seeing the 90s era like crime panic. And I do think that the backlash to that with these election defeats is going to be the exact same like crime bill, but this time 2022 edition. Ironic because Joe Biden is president, but I do fear that is what is going to happen.
Time to go back to the old me. Bring out the Bugs Bunny meme.
Yeah,
for Dark Brandon.
Which exactly. which I don't even know what you could do in that situation. Like, how can you make it more brutal? You have places like fucking Rikers in New York that, even people that ran on, even Eric Adams, who ran on like saying that he was going to potentially continue along with the shutting down Rikers, is now saying, no, we need to fund it more. And like 18 people have died, or they're like waiting for trial. You know what I mean? It's just like, it's insane. I don't know how you could make that even worse somehow. I guess. Well, Trump has mentioned it. He said he's going to execute drug dealers. Yeah, he said he's going to execute drug dealers. Trump literally has said on the campaign trail, what we should do next is start executing drug dealers. So
yeah, we're going to take the Duterte pill. They're going to take like what if it worked for Bolsonaro and Duterte, we're going to do that here.
Yeah. So that's pretty cool, I guess. What do you think about Florida? Do you think that there is? I mean, you've probably seen the Ron, what does he say? The sanctimonious line from Donald Trump in his last campaign rally. He said that in Florida. You know, he went into his house and he said, Ron DeSanctimonious, not his greatest, okay? Not his greatest. I think he's still working it. He's still workshopping it. He's definitely running. What do you think is going to happen there?
I think he's gonna run. Like, he's gonna run. The entire Republican Party is gonna like get behind him, except for some like your Larry Hogans and people who are less famous than Larry Hogan, who are gonna stand up and lose. I feel like that's an easy prediction. I feel I'm almost more interested in the Democrats right now. I just was talking about, not to like moll it, but like what I'm interested with Democrats is that there is an idea. Joe Biden, like, unfalse viable. Joe Biden beat Donald Trump once. Can he do it again? Can Biden, who will be at that point 81 years old, beat Donald Trump again? I think most Democrats do not think that, just for both his record and his age. So I'm interested in what Democrats think here, because there will be an election where Republicans did well. We'll see how well. There's probably some races where they lost or they shouldn't have lost because Trump endorsed somebody and Trump changed the whole issue matrix to, election fraud and all that stuff. And there'll be some Democrats who say, all right, well, the 78-year-old Donald Trump, who half the country can't believe is still here, hates him. If we have a fresh Democratic Party face, surely we can beat that guy. And I think they'll have a messier primary than Republicans. I just don't see how any Republican puts up the resistance to Trump. I mean, I make fun of all these quotes, anonymous quotes you see in articles where some reporters but one Republican strategist said, I'm like, yeah, he's not putting his name on it. Like, he's like Republican strategists who say that somebody can beat Trump and then don't tell you who they are because they think it would come back to haunt them. That's because they don't really believe it. They have no plan for stopping him. So I think he's gonna either they're trying to, every rally he does now, they hype up. He could announce it here. He'll announce at some point. Next week or whatever. Say he's running. Say that you can't, investigate me now because it's political if you do that. Whatever. And I feel like the Republicans will sort themselves out pretty quickly. Just because I've seen it for, however many years. When he is caught doing something illegal or possibly illegal, Republicans say, how dare Democrats do this to the leader of our party? They don't say, great, this is an opportunity to stop them. So with all the opportunities they've had, I think they just won't. They're just gonna accept that Trump leads the party and count on him to ramp up turnout and interpret the elections. If it's a really good election, it'll be easy. And just say, hey, these midterms prove that nobody could have turned out our base like Donald Trump. Like, nobody, the energy that he's taken to our party, the way he's changed our party, the way he gave us the confidence to fight the left, like Kerry Lake. I mean, I think the week after the election is just going to be the end of Evangelion, everyone clapping for Shinji, for Donald Trump on the Republican Party. That's what I'm expecting. And then with Democrats, they're going to just be in their first full on hair pulling fit since 2016.
Oh God, it is. One final question that I have for you. Have you seen? I think it was a Wall Street Journal poll that came out recently that had some really unique numbers there with respect to black and brown voters and the Democratic Party losing its, well, not these kinds of articles are written before every election where they're like, the Republicans are owning the black vote. Like, they're actually destroying the Democrats. Like, they've really boosted their numbers. And it goes from like 8% support to like 9%. You know what I mean? Which is ridiculous, right? But I believe there was a poll that just came out earlier today that Andrew had posted about as well. He says, more worrying signs for Democrats in this Wall Street Journal poll showing Republicans making big inroads with black and Hispanic voters. Biden's lead 2020 pollster is quoted as calling it a possible paradigm shift election, making inroads with working class minorities. And by that, they mean non-college educated black and non-college educated Hispanic voters are now, the Republicans have consistently increased their numbers within these demographics. So have you seen this on the ground? Is this just like media narrative that is the same every fucking election cycle? Because I'll give you some numbers here. Among Latino voters, Democrats held a lead of 5 percentage points over Republicans in the choice of a congressional candidate in the Journal's October survey, a narrower advantage than the 11-point lead in August. And also, the Democratic support has diminished or deteriorated as a consequence of degrees of concern about inflation and the direction of the economy. Of course, in 2020, they favored Biden over Trump by 28 percentage points and Democratic candidates in the 2018 House races by 31 points.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, I've seen. I've gone to places where Republicans definitely have gained some ground. I went to South Texas 3 times this cycle. I think once 2021 and then a couple times this year. And there definitely are conservative Latinos who vote Democratic for other reasons. It's like, apart from online, people have like complicated views, right? Like, there are lots of Democrats who they like don't agree with the party on guns, but they think that Republicans just shift everything to the rich whenever they get the chance. That's kind of South Texas. And they have made gains there, and again with the money, like they poured a ton of money into it. What Democrats will tell you is like, we've still got the support, we still have good organization. What's new is like they went from spending $0 to millions of dollars to help these candidates. In black areas, I think I have Detroit in my head because I was in Michigan, and there's not like a Republican surge with black voters. They actually kind of deprioritized that a little bit in parts. They used to have a big Detroit outreach office, and it's been a little bit less in the news and less active. There it's just they think it's just as good to convince black voters that Democrats aren't fixing anything and it's not worth turning out. But I think they do have openings with all those voters. And what worries the Democrats I talk to is they're not reaching out like George Bush did. George Bush would talk about immigration reform, talk about family reunification, focus on just kind of quality of life education issues. What Republicans are doing in South Texas, where I've seen this the most, is they're running ads against open borders. They're saying Democrats want to change your kid's gender. They're basically running as MAGA Republicans and thinking, well, we're not going to get like 70% of the Latino vote, but if we're pulling out like 10% more of Latinos, especially Latino men, who agree with that, like, you know, they were voting Democratic, but they agree that like there are pedophile rings, or they agree that like Democrats are too mean to the Border Patrol, then like every bit counts. We're going to keep increasing our I think that's definitely going to happen. Like, I don't think they're going to win the Latino vote, black vote, etc. I think they're going to improve a little bit just based on all the stuff I saw.
Yeah, they're not. They're never going to win. No. That's what I was saying. I mean, so one interesting piece of evidence here is that about 17% of black voters said they would pick a Republican candidate for Congress over a Democrat in the polls, both in late October and in August. That is actually very large in comparison to the 8% of black voters who voted for former President Donald Trump in 2020 and 8% who backed the GOP candidates in 2018 House races. So, like, that is a big shift. And you're right. I think that they're not, like, changing their messaging. They're if anything, they're getting more aggressive and more racist, I would say. And it's more commonplace to cut, like, super racist agitprop. But I think the years and years of chipping away at like the Democratic Party's base of support is finally having some returns maybe, and the Democratic Party's lack of action in truly uplifting any of these voting blocks, and instead just becoming like the only defensive voter solution for a lot of black voters is like now creating this problem for them electorally. As far as the Hispanic voter turnout, the thing I was going to say is the Texas GOP's been doing this obviously because they had to. They had to for a very long time. They know that Latino voters across the board are not a monolith, but there are certain things that Latino voters are more open-minded on, and I'm not talking about Venezuelan and Cuban populations of Florida, but the rest of the Latino voter bloc is even across the board, even like older generations of Latino voters are very open-minded towards like bigger government initiatives. At least that's what polls show. And the Democrats are never going to push for that. They're never like targeting that from what I've seen. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you can tell me that I'm wrong about that. But instead, the GOP in Texas has always hyper-focused on like Catholicism and, you know, satanic panic, like social conservatism, which is now turned into the weird like reigniting of the satanic panic. We are truly living through the 90s again when you think about it.
Yeah, it's like the worst 90s with some bad 80s mixed into it. Like it's incredible. I end up like boring everyone I talk to at length. Hopefully not you, but it's like it all just comes back like we didn't have stuff melting our brains every minute and like melting other people's brains and telling them be panicked all the time. Like I guess it's like it's asking a lot of society to have to like be normal when that is happening. Because that's what I end up. This happened like the 2014 midterms. A big reason the Democrats lose is people panic about Ebola at the last minute, and then nobody gets one guy gets Ebola, but people are panicking about it. And I don't think the only times you've seen like the left be in a great position to win and win a governing majority is when people are panicked about real material conditions and Republicans are in power, right? I don't know what other opportunities Democrats truly can take advantage of. Like, again, like the fact that they're going to hold on a bunch of stuff in this election anyway, I think does indicate Republicans are their best hope for Democrats, that Republicans are, because they see themselves gaining without changing anything, that they're going to keep going further right and alienate some people. But look, they're convinced, like the guys who have the upper hand in the arguments of the conservative movement right now are saying, you don't need to change anything. We, instead of pandering to Latino voters, we should have been saying for years, like, you're here already, you're patriotic, Democrats hate America, we're going to keep like the other migrants out. And if they become convinced like that works, they're going to keep moving to the right. Branded as working class, like branded as like, this is populism, this is working class, it's for everybody. Like they really want, if it's a good election, conservatives, not just Republicans, but conservatives who want the party to keep moving right, they want the story to be populist Republican Party unapologetically running against open borders and crime, wins, working class coalition. That is a story they want there, is that it is them with voters who have real concerns. It's the annoying liberals with too many college degrees and pink hair who disagree with us. The people who say stuff like, fight for somebody you don't like Bernie Sanders, that's hippie nonsense. Whatever we need is for everyone to just be worried about the same things we're worried about. And I feel like they've made a lot of progress towards that with non-white voters. Like I've seen that in some places. And yeah, I don't know what Democrats are going to do if they're going to say, okay, well, here's a full-on panic. We're going to do the 90s again or something else. Because they are very worried that they just spent 2 years not effectively responding to that inroad and reaching out to non-white voters with the same kind of populist, screw the liberals, close the borders message. If that works with non-white voters, that is going to have a lot of repercussions.
Overall, what would you rank the Democratic Party's performance and the Republican Party's performance so far in the midterms? I mean, as far as campaigning goes, as far as like hyper-focusing on the issues and whatnot.
Overall, yeah, Republicans were more on message and more consistent. Democrats, I mean, like some of the things they focused on they were always going to focus on. Like the Capitol gets like invaded by Trump supporters, they're going to have hearings on it. That was going to happen. Roe gets overturned, that was going to happen. So you can't really blame the Democrats for, hey, things that happened that make you worried for the future of democracy and women's rights. Don't talk about them. Like pivot back to inflation or something. I think what they didn't do was come up with an argument for why, even though we're the party in power, you should get us in there to keep fighting inflation. And I think part of that is just like realistically, inflation wasn't going down, so there wasn't much they couldn't credibly do that day to day. They couldn't say, "See, it went down 2 points," but they didn't try like early on. The reason it's going up is because of a tax on corporations getting even more surplus labor value from workers, and we're going to tax them and get it back, or we're going to raise taxes on the wealthy because the economics texts show us, that a lot of this is just too much money being flooded in the system. There's a conservative liberal agreement that a lot of the economy is like fake, right? The fact that there are a lot of people who are billionaires because a bunch of other rich people looked at their company's prospectus as like, this is a $10 billion company. We're seeing that with like Elon and Tesla and Twitter right now. Not that it's not worth something, but you can convince people, I think, that the economy is like fake and built on unfairness or scams. Like that happened in 2008, and I think this isn't as harsh as what happened in 2008. But Democrats were nervous about challenging the system because there is the risk. There's like a capital strike. How much can you strike out against business without them saying, okay, we're not going to drill for more oil. We're not going to. We're going to shrink the size of our products. We're going to focus. We're going to give stock buybacks. They're very limited in what they can do. But they didn't really have any kind of populist message saying, keep us in there and we're going to keep fighting. And they used to. FDR could do it. You have to go back that far. You can make an argument that, hey, we're in power and things aren't fixed yet, but they're not fixed because of the rich people extracting all these benefits. I don't think they did that consistently. And I think Republicans did do a bunch of things consistently, and most of it is going to have worked.
I lost you again. What the heck?
Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah, you're back. You're back.
I'm just plugged in.
You said Republicans. No. It's my fault. It's a Discord thing. Don't worry. It's not your fault. Go on.
Mm-hmm.
You said Republicans.
No, I was just saying. I want to repeat every point. Democrats have been less consistent and didn't have a coherent. We're going to fix inflation and tackle it X, Y, and Z by going after rich and raising taxes or whatever, like things that they think would work that would be popular.
Yeah.
And then Republicans had a consistent message, a couple. They shifted over time, but it was inflation's bad, borders open, and crime is everywhere. And that was it every single day. They only got kind of thrown off course on abortion. And then what they did on abortion is saying, why are Democrats talking about this abortion stuff instead of the three things that we keep talking about? That was Republicans ran a better midterm campaign, and then we will see which Democrats stood out and figured out a different way to win.
It goes back to, in my opinion, I think it still goes back to the fact that they are beholden to the same corporate benefactors ultimately. And on the Democratic side, they are also allergic to tax increases for the corporations and the wealthy, unless it comes in the aftermath of a tax cut, like the Trump tax cuts were for the middle class. Those taxes are raised again for the middle class, and the only tax cuts that were made permanent are the corporate tax cuts and the top marginal tax rate. Yes, I do think that the Democratic Party is too fearful of pushing that message because, one, Republicans are very good at just immediately clamping down on that and then turning around and making it seem like any sort of tax hike is actually a tax hike for the middle class, even though messaging-wise, the IRA had some stuff in it that, Republicans, I feel like, were not able to adequately attack tax increases and make it seem like it's everyone's problem, like they did with the death tax.
What they usually do with tax increases is just like say, Democrats raise taxes on the middle class and like either extrapolate like, well, if you force if you tax corporations by the transitive property, the people who work for the corporate, they'll find like a rationale, or they just don't. Like what happens some of the times is that people just like they don't bother mentioning in the ad what tax the Democrat raised. But yeah, Democrats like they've gotten out of the habit of just saying, what if we raise taxes on the rich in a way that that they noticed and that shrunk the deficit and attacked inflation? There are Democrats who want to do it, but they don't do it. And if you just don't have any response whatsoever, I don't think there's a good alternative. And look, maybe they did that. Maybe they try that. What happens is this is what happened with some of the Build Back Better, that like Joe Manchin kills it, so you can't even run on it. Like they didn't have like great options, but they definitely didn't come up with some comprehensive response that was, here is how we're going to fight inflation. They just didn't do that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Dave, thank you so much for coming on. Where can people find you? And is there anything you want to promote?
Yeah, I am now at Semaphore. It's a new startup. I joined was one of the early employees. It is free online. Semaphore spelled SEMAFOR.com. And I got a newsletter there called Americana. That's like the campaign newsletter I was writing at the Post. Just kind of a different sort of outlet. Like we want to make news and cover stuff and break stories. But we kind of separate. We have the reporting high up all in one place. And then if you go down the article, we'll break out things like somebody else's opinion, the reporter's opinion, a view from internationally. Like we're just experimenting with different ways to tell the news. So I'm having fun. Everyone should read it. It is totally free. The newsletter's free. Stop complaining about paywalls. Unless we do one, then we'll deal with that later. For now, it is definitely free, and like I'm very happy with what we're doing there.
Hell yeah. Well, thank you so much, Dave, for coming on. And,
Yeah.
you know, if you have some time, I'd love to have you on again, you know, to give some post-election analysis or during the midterms. I'm not putting you on the spot here. I'm sure you're a busy dude, so let me know.
No, I was really happy to talk to you again. Thanks for thinking of me. I mean, and this election the count might last a while. So if you need me back for something, just tell me.
That is what's going to definitely happen. All right. Thanks, Dave. Bye.
All right. Thank you. Bye.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, that was Dave Weigel of Semaphore, formerly of the Washington Post. He's brilliant. He's, he's constantly roaming the country, talking to people individually where they live. I like Dave a lot. He made a reference to